Is medicine really medicine if you have to take it every day to feel normal? Does it make more sense to take a substance derived from earth, such as LSD and psilocybin, a few times to heal a disorder like depression and anxiety, or to take a chemically infused pill every day that costs a boatload of money? A large portion of United States citizens are taking prescribed drugs every day to cope with depression, anxiety, ADHD, pain, and more, in which this is not healing them, but rather just putting a band aid on the problem. In recent years, though, doctors around the world have taken an interest in the ability of LSD and shrooms to heal their mentally ill patients, in which they have come to the conclusion that these substances offer much more promising healing effects than any prescribed antidepressant drug. I have always been interested in holistic approaches to healing. I've done hours upon hours of research and reading to inform myself about psychedelic therapy and prescribed drugs. I would like to first start out by giving you a little background on how LSD and shrooms have been and are perceived by society and why this stigma is false. The laws surrounding the use and possession of LSD and shrooms places a fear on these drugs that should not be there. LSD and shrooms offer much more benefits to society than negative, if taken by the right people at the right time, of course. I want you to think for a second about what people have told you about psychedelics. For me, no one really talked about them, but I always put psychedelics in the same category as all the other illegal drugs, such as meth, cocaine, heroin. But every once in a while, someone would say, "Don't ever take psychedelics, you might jump off a cliff." I wanted to dissociate the stigma around psychedelics that most of us grew up with, considering psychedelics are still illegal in most states in America. Contrary to popular belief, psychedelic drugs are not physically addictive. Animal and human studies indicate low abuse and no physical dependence potential. Major national surveys indicate low rates of abuse, treatment seeking, and harm. Psychedelic drugs are also not physically dangerous, and by this I mean you could inhale as much psilocybin, LSD, as you wanted, and while this may not be enjoyable, you will not die. There are currently no known long-term effects of taking psychedelics. And since these drugs have been around for thousands of years, we would surely know if there were long-term effects. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University recently suggested that the FDA's classification for psilocybin be changed from a Schedule I drug, which has no known medical benefit, to a Schedule IV drug, which is similar to conventional prescription. Prescription drugs should be viewed as dangerous or more dangerous than shrooms and LSD, if anything. Because doctors are highly respected individuals in the community, we trust that whatever medicine they give us is safe and healthy. This is dangerous, though, because prescribed drugs tend to be much more addictive. Adderall, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds are all proven to cause physical addiction in the brain, and they each come with some pretty nasty side effects. People who take psychedelics may be labeled as druggies because people do not realize the safety of these drugs. However, psychedelics actually open up neural pathways in the brain, which is why it's always referred to as psychedelics expand the mind. Steve Jobs is actually a frequent user of LSD and says taking LSD was one of the two most important things he ever did in his life. He even credits LSD to helping him create Apple, so without him we wouldn't have our phones, computers, and I only mention this to help try and break the stigma around psychedelic users. In the 1950s and 60s, psychedelic drugs were widely used by the government, doctors, psychologists, and research that pursued a wide range of mental processes and disorders. They were coming to positive results too, but the drugs were later abandoned by the government due to the social outbreaks that they caused against the government. Now that you're aware that psychedelics are not what they are made out to be by law enforcement, they're physically harmless to the body and the mind when taken in the right place and with safe individuals. Now let's evaluate how psychedelics can be used for better in society. LSD and shrooms can and should replace antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. How many of you know someone who takes prescribed medication for mental health illness? Or maybe you take them yourself. Ask yourself this: if you were the one struggling with anxiety, depression, ADHD, would you rather take an addictive pill every day that may help one problem and cause another? Or would you rather take a substance derived from earth, like psilocybin or LSD, that could be taken once every few months? Let's look at how psilocybin and LSD are being used at the most prestigious medical centers for treating mental illness. Doctors at Johns Hopkins are experimenting with psychedelics to determine the chemical's effectiveness as a new therapy for addiction, anorexia, and depression. In one study, mushrooms are taken in higher doses where doctors and therapists guide participants through their trip. Because they were taken in larger doses, the mushrooms tend to bring out lots of emotion and spirituality people were not even aware they had. One participant shares her experience in which she was extremely depressed and was ready for her life to be over before the trial. After taking a substantial amount of mushrooms, like 3 grams, she states, "I experienced this kind of unity, of resonant love, the sense that I'm not alone anymore. That there was this thing holding me that was bigger than my grief. I felt welcome back to the world." Unlike taking antidepressants every day to feel normal, someone can take mushrooms once and have their depression significantly healed. Studies are being done with cancer patients, in which patients have reported that their depression and anxiety has significantly gotten better since consuming mushrooms. 2 small pilot studies of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy also have shown positive benefit in treating both alcohol and nicotine addiction. Prescribed antidepressants, on the other hand, do not heal mental illnesses and come with a range of side effects. In a Harvard University study, 65% of consumers suffer from weight gain, 65% feel emotionally numb, 53% do not feel themselves, 75% suffer from withdrawals, 50% claim they are addicted, 36% report not caring as much about other people, and 32% report having thoughts about suicide. As users develop a tolerance for antidepressants, they become less effective over time, in which symptoms can come back down the road. They hypothesize that the drugs may lead to changes in the brain that actually further depression. The short-term positive effects of antidepressants do not outweigh the long-term negative effects. Psychedelic treatment is very safe. Not only are psychedelics proven to not be physically addictive, but doctors make sure the patients do extensive preparation with the therapist, which includes a complete medical history and advice and information about the study drug. People with a history of psychosis are excluded, as there is not enough evidence showing that psychedelics are completely safe amongst people with psychosis. The biggest concern amongst the public is the possibility of having a bad trip. A bad trip is defined by a frightening and unpleasant experience triggered by a psychoactive drug. And while one may have a bad trip, the effects on a normal, healthy participant are not long-lasting, and they will be in a safe environment where nothing bad can happen to them. Bad trips are something felt in the moment, in which the fear and anxiety that can be caused in these trips dissipates shortly after the trip ends. Hopefully you can see the promising research and treatment methods being used with psychedelics to conclude that prescribed medications for mental illnesses are not serving its users well. Now you are aware of the positive results of psychedelic therapy in comparison with the adults of taking prescribed medications. Let's evaluate the different approaches to psychedelic therapy and how psychedelics work in your brain. Raise your hand if the idea of taking psychedelics scare you. If your hand is up, I want to show you other ways psychedelics can be taken that may be less intimidating than treatment where patients consume the substance in higher doses. While the majority of studies involve higher doses of psilocybin, there are plenty of studies that involve microdosing LSD and psilocybin. Microdosing psychedelics is characterized with more subtle and small changes over time, whereas taking them in larger doses may be scarier but has a significant change after one trip. Self-experimenters inspired by Johns Hopkins research are taking tiny, subperceptual doses of LSD to encourage workplace creativity and influence a more positive perception in life. Correspondents have told him regular microdosing has alleviated many disorders, including depression, migraines, ADHD, while increasing outside-the-box thinking. Let's see how psychedelics work in your brain. LSD and shrooms do not alter brain chemicals, rather they expand neural pathways and allow new pathways to connect. In a study, Olson and his team found that psychedelic drugs increase the number of branches and dendritic spines on neurons, and also increase the number of synapses or connections between neurons. This means that these drugs can help repair brain networks in the prefrontal cortex that might be damaged in conditions like anxiety and depression. In short, psychedelics allow different and more neural pathways in the brain to connect, which is why people use the term expand your mind in regards to psychedelics. Psychedelics truly hold promising results in the medical field. The ability to use Earth's elements for healing and learning is such a cool thing. The main thing I want you to take away is the fact that psychedelic drugs are not what they are made out to be in society. They are a medicine that have the ability to open your mind, heal from depression, anxiety, addiction, and more. The healing effects of psychedelics are much greater than any prescribed drug on the market. If you or anyone you know suffers from depression, anxiety, addiction, PTSD, or other mental illnesses, please stand up. I know you're probably frustrated with what our medical system has to offer in efforts to treat these mental illnesses, but I want you to have hope, for we are progressing and learning that psychedelics hold so much power in medicine. If society can accept psychedelics, we can use these substances to heal our mental illness epidemic. We have hope for a brighter, healthier, and happier future.